So all these reasons, once again, including simony and indulgences, would create this kind of doubt in the system. And indulgences, in case you don't remember, were a payment basically to be released from purgatory. The belief was that there's heaven and there's hell and there's earth, but in between earth and heaven in particular, there's a stage, a waiting room, so to speak, to use a metaphor, before you got into heaven. And to release people from that, the church basically accepted the type of payment. Now, this originally was meant to help fund the Crusades, but then later on would also help fund St. Peter's Basilica, which is a large church in Rome. And so they basically continued to collect money for this. So simony, selling of church offices, and indulgences were the two things in particular that Martin Luther took offense to. And of course, all those other reasons that I've meant, the Black Death, Renaissance, anti-clericalism, and so on, that kind of sets the stage for his complaints to be more accepted. Also, during the Renaissance, two people, John Wycliffe and Jan Hus, both were people that wanted some type of reform to happen within the church. So there were people before him, once again, just like Martin Luther in the beginning, didn't want to end anything, that did try to question what was going on. But Martin Luther was horrified at the indulgences. He thought this debased the church, it corrupted it, and it also misinterpreted exactly what is supposed to happen when someone dies. And so he was greatly offended, especially at the selling of indulgences. So, as we already know, he made a list of ideas, main ideas, basically 95 theses, that he ended up nailing to the door at the castle church at Wittenberg. And of course, Wittenberg is spelled with a W, but it's in Germany, so it's pronounced with a V. But anyway, the 95 Theses being nailed to the church door was just the beginning, though. But in it, basically, he pointed out his concerns over the control of money, the ideas involving purgatory and what happens to you after you die. And this document was duplicated quite a few times through the use of Gutenberg's printing press. So this is one of the first kind of incidents where a mass production of information, particularly something critical, would happen throughout Europe because of the printing press. So would Martin Luther have been as instrumental without this? Maybe not. Martin Luther himself believed that a secular government, in other words, one of the kings or nobles, could help reform the church. He also had his doubts in the sacraments. There are 7 sacraments in the Catholic Church. He did not accept all of them. And he also believed that grace and whether or not you live, your soul lives forever, and you go to heaven, that is because of the grace of God. So he did not think that simply doing good works, which is part of the Catholic Church's teachings, is what gets you into heaven. It's because of God's grace. And he thought that the church didn't focus enough on that anymore. Needless to say, once this became circulated, Pope Leo X would issue a papal bull. And papal is spelled P-A-P-A-L. And bull is just spelled like bull, B-U-L-L. And basically, this is a commanding document. And it demanded that Luther recant his ideas. And of course, there are a lot of people that are incredibly faithful to the Catholic Church, not just priests, but also families of all kinds of classes, upper and lower class. And so many people started to burn copies of Luther's 95 Theses, but in turn, Luther ended up burning a copy of the papal bull. So it started to turn into a war of symbolism more than anything else. The problem for the Pope is that he doesn't necessarily have a lot of sway outside of Rome itself when it comes to enforcing anything that he wants to do. And so their attempt to try to curtail this Protestant Reformation that was starting to brew wasn't going to be successful without some type of help. And so Pope Leo X is going to get some assistance from the person who's supposed to be in charge of the German city-states, which is the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. Charles V is also the King of Spain, and so he controls an enormous amount of territory and wealth and government officials. And so Charles V, as the Holy Roman Empire, basically calls Luther to trial in front of the Diet of Worms, which in this case is spelled Worms. So this trial is kind of a public display to try to question Martin Luther's beliefs and get him to recant for the Pope. However, that's not really going to work. In fact, Luther does an excellent job of defending himself. He's not intimidated by Charles V or the church. He very well knows, of course, that he could probably be executed for heresies, but he's not bothered by any of that. So Luther does not accept the authority of the Pope and the Council in this. And this is kind of where the final straw was, that the Pope basically had him put on trial just for exercising criticism. And so this kind of convinced Luther that maybe the Catholic Church couldn't be saved and that instead something new had to be begun. But once again, it's not like he saw himself as a new pope and this is going to be my own church or anything like that. Well, Charles V also knew that there was some sympathy for Martin Luther, so he did not want to make him a martyr or execute him. And so instead, he would ban him from the Holy Roman Empire. But something else is occurring in the background of all of this. And this will be true also for the 30 Years' War. We often, when we first learn about these things, especially the middle school level, we just simply look at it as Protestant versus Catholics, and people just hacked away at each other in a war and argued a lot. But there was something more to it than that. The German princes and nobles did not like the fact that they had to pay church taxes. They did not like the fact that some of the lands in their territories were owned by the church. And they also did not like the fact that they basically had to listen to the Pope and they had to listen to this Holy Roman Empire who had been crowned by the Pope. And they saw this as an opportunity. So some of the nobles that would help Martin Luther did it because they really legitimately believed in Protestantism, but other ones did it for political reasons. The Elector of Saxony, which is one of the princes that gets to vote for the Holy Roman Empire, he ended up hiding Martin Luther during this time so he wouldn't be expelled. So a new church ends up being created while Martin Luther is hidden because he can work behind the scenes and provide advice and assistance. And they're only going to accept two sacraments, communion and baptism. He basically said the other sacraments don't count. These are the only two that appear in the Bible. When Jesus, of course, has the Last Supper for communion and baptism. Obviously, Jesus himself went to go get baptized. So he said these are the only two that count because they're the only ones that are in the Bible. Also, maybe for personal reasons, but he also decides that clergy can get married. So he quickly gets married after this. And this, of course, is another big difference for the church because at this point, they've decided that priests should remain celibate. So it didn't die down. And because of the printing press and all this information getting out, because there was resistance, because someone hid Martin Luther, you then start to see it spread throughout what we call modern-day Germany, also Scandinavia, which is Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and so on, England, Scotland, the Netherlands, and even parts of France. Now, that will later on be brutally suppressed, which is why you can't find a lot of Protestants in France. But for a period of time, it was quite successful there. And probably two of the reasons why it was successful, or one reason why it was successful, is Martin Luther taught that Christianity should be a priesthood of all believers. In other words, every individual should have a relationship and a connection to Christ and God. Bless you. So, of course, a lot of people were encouraged by this. And because they got to express their own beliefs, their own personal relationship, their spiritual relationship. And it also meant that wealthier nobles were not more important than them. Unfortunately, some of the peasants took it a little too far. Some of them decided to stage revolts against their local nobles. Martin Luther wasn't interested in any of that. He was just concerned about religious reform, and he knew this would just bring about violence and anarchy. And so he actually condemned the revolts, and they were easily suppressed by the nobility. So the new church, in other words, will be controlled by the nobility. The princes will have a lot of influence over it. They took the earliest opportunity they could to confiscate all the church land that they could from the Catholic Church, which of course is going to draw the ire of the church itself. And the Protestant princes also would cause trouble with the Holy Roman Emperor because they are going to basically go their own way and not listen to him, despite the fact that he himself is an incredibly devout Catholic. So this all troubled Charles V quite a bit, but it proved that the Holy Roman Emperor position was weak. It's not like he could do anything. He had an army as the King of Spain, but he didn't have one as the Holy Roman Emperor, and all of these lesser nobles than him aren't going to cooperate or assist in stopping the spread of Lutheranism because some of them are actually making it happen. And so within a short period of time, you will see, I don't know if I have that anywhere in here. We'll talk more about some of these other guys tomorrow. I don't know where this chart is. It's actually not a chart, it's a map. But the spread I'm vamping. The map shows that the spread of Protestantism will happen quite quickly and throughout a lot of Northern Europe in particular. But that's all the notes, and you can go ahead and tuck away that document because we won't come back to it again until tomorrow. So once again, the agenda for today, hopefully you got done with the Chapter 3 assignment. The Chapter 4 table is already posted with your page numbers. Make sure you type up the most significant points, probably in Google Docs, and then put them into the table. And then the AP2 chart is visible. So you just need to add a bulleted list of 3 items for each of the topics mentioned. The first half goes over different parts of the Protestant Reformation. The second half goes over the 30 Years' War, which we'll cover toward the end of the week. And you can find all of that on Canvas if you look at the AP2 module. So hopefully you turned in the AP2 Political Luther. That's at the top. Then the next is Chapter 3, then Chapter 4. Check out what your page numbers are. And the AP2 chart is next. The AP2 notebook, you won't submit those notes until the end of the week.